This is a letter from April 1989. My dear friends, I was on lunch hour with friends and mentioned a poem I had read about murderous women. The conversation drifted to actual murders by women, and I said that among natives of the Great Plains it was common practice in pre-Columbian days for captured women to be brought to home camp so the women could torture them to death for the general amusement of all. I added that by extension, since most people on earth until very recently had lived in such tribal society, women had probably been willing and casual torturers for most of time. John, who carries some resentment over preferential treatment given to gender or race, jumped on this and dared me to put it in the next letter, telling me that if I did, any feminist who read it would hurl the letter and a stream of invective back in my face. It could happen, but that sort of bigot is not, I think, among my readers, and if some or any are so deeply offended, well, goodbye. These letters are delivered about equally to the sexes, and I'm not writing to men or women, but directly to you. If you sense our kinship, you may be, with me, intrigued by our shared history of torture. But if your feminist sensibilities have been hurt because women are different from men and would never, ever have taken casual pleasure in the mutilation of a fallen enemy, quit reading. Last January, Rick, my friend and companion from the past, came to visit. He had not seen these letters and I'd been writing for a couple of years, and I, who loved to read them aloud, seized the chance, selecting and reading some to him, including one that had not been generally distributed, but rather had gone out only to professional religious people. The gist of that letter was, evil is knowingly supported at the risk of the soul. Both Republican and Democrat candidates advocate foreign policy that is evil. Voting for either is supporting such evil. Therefore, vote for someone, anyone, not advocating such evil for the good of the soul. There had been only one response, a Methodist minister who agreed that both parties were evil, but as no other candidate had any chance of election, casting a vote for anyone else was simply not practical. I wrote back to him, sending copies to other professional religious people too, asking how could a vote that was practical but immoral be justified? No one replied. When I finished reading, Rick was quite frank when he told me that he understood why there had been no reply, because what I had written was condemnatory rant, the sort of inflammatory rhetoric used by pro-life fundamentalists, the sort no one should dignify with a reply. I said that it was no such condemnation, but a question phrased as clearly and sincerely as I was able after years of thought, and then sent only to people who make their living as professional religious and who had represented an interest in moral questions. I reminded my friend that I'm a low-level bureaucrat from an unfashionable neighborhood in a backwater town, and I lack the authority to condemn anyone or anything. What I'd written was sincere questioning that merited a reply, and if any recipient had held condemnation, then they should justify themselves with a reasoned reply or change their evil ways. My friend again said baldly that the letter was condemnatory rant, unworthy of reply, and he's pretty sharp and he might be right, but I don't think so. While I was in South America in 1971, it came out in major media that the USA had set up a school outside of Washington, D.C., where police and military from around the world are taught, at American taxpayer expense, physical techniques like where to attach electric wires and psychological methods such as sending electrical current through children in front of their parents, of torture. At first, I would not believe it, as I was full of John Wayne and I had no mental room for an image of evil America. But it continued to be reported in various sources, even Time magazine, and was never disputed or denied. Today, it was in 1989 when this was first written, and in 1999 when I recopied it, and today, 2017, many graduates of our school are in power around the world, indebted to us for their training and their power. If any feminist is offended by reference to torture long ago and far away, let me point out that that has nothing to do with now and you. If women did tie poor some soul down and then burn and gouge him to death, what does that have to do with us? Nothing. But current torture by American trainees may not be disclaimed by asserting that it's the work only of men. All people are enfranchised, we can all vote, we are all complicit. Just so, for any religious who are offended, our representative government has established a school of torture and has not apologized or forsworn to continue the vile practice. If anyone supports this, even tacitly or ignorantly, I want to offend you. Your conscience should bother you. You should be ashamed. Yet, many people feel our policy is justified because it's practical. They say it is a competitive world and a person and a nation must do what is necessary to be number one. Thinking of this reminds me of the 4 Germans I met while traveling in Latin America. Rick and I had been seated on the same crag for hours before the tourist train crawled into sight about noon, so tiny in the depth of the canyon that it would hardly have been noticed except for the movement and the puffs of smoke. I was sorry to see it slow and stop because that meant someone was going to get off and ascend to where we sat in beautiful solitude. Company's coming, commented Rick. Now we had made the ascent the day before, getting off the train where a foot suspension bridge is hung across the Urubamba River a few kilometers before the tourist train station stop below Machu Picchu. After the train pulled away, we had swayed across the river, enjoying the cool breeze above the rushing water, stopping in the middle of the swinging footbridge to look up at the towering peaks on either side. We had climbed the switchback trail up the steep canyon face a few thousand feet until it joined an ancient Incan highway that paralleled the river below. It had been very hot once away from the rushing water, but Rick and I had not hurried, stopping every couple of switchbacks to smoke and admire the view. And when we topped out at the level stone paved road after about 3 hours, we were not tired but exhilarated. A killer climb, but an Inca road in the wild Andes. Wow! A short walk of 10 minutes or so brought us to the cluster of ruins among which we now sat, perched on the stone foundation of an Inca house built long ago on the very lip of a rock jutting out from the canyon wall. What a sight! There was sky above and below, wild mountains all around. Across the canyon, the Andes hurled skyward, one peak so tall that we never saw the summit because of roiling, lightning-flashing clouds swirled about it the day long. And immediately to our left, the canyon had been terraced in ancient days, and the tourist-hungry government of today had recently cleared away the underbrush, allowing native flowers to flourish and fill the terraces. Insects fill the flowers. To our right and back a bit, a small waterfall gurgled to combine with the breeze and the insect drone into the perfect musical accompaniment for the spot. Yeah, they'll probably get here late in the afternoon, I replied after some time. I hope they're not jerks. We basked in the sun, remarking desultorily on the spider that trapped and wrapped and dragged off his lunch, and the occasional iridescent blue flash that signaled a butterfly fluttering thousands of feet below. But after only an hour and a half or so, our serenity was punctuated by marching feet. We weren't happy with such an early arrival, having expected the arduous climb to prolong our solitude until near nightfall, but we greeted the hiker civilly. He was loaded with camping and camera gear, hiking boots, shorts, and a cap. Puffing only slightly, he marched directly to our perch. Ich bin Reinhold. It's a wonderful walk, no? Wonderful exercise. It's good, yeah? Yeah, it's a great climb. A little steep, though, I said. Oh, nein, nicht. It's a little walk. He hadn't dropped his gear, and he stood as if he was ready to climb on. Did you come alone? Rick asked the question on both our minds. Meinen Freunden kommen, wir sind wir. He didn't stay for more chit-chat. Perhaps the language put him off, though we speculate that he wanted to get away from us to sit down and take the load off. He walked a short distance to the temple ruins where partially standing walls and a makeshift roof sheltered our sleeping bags, and he went through the door and out of sight. That's super German, I said. Yeah, he must have run up the mountain without stopping to look one time, Rick replied, before we went back to idly considering the... Oh yeah, Tina, let me have that.
Thank you very much, Tina.
Thanks, Tina.
It's good in sugar? Yeah? Okay. And you can put it over there in the...
He must have run up the mountain without stopping to look one time, Rick replied, before we went back to idly considering the frequent lightning in the storm cloud boiling across the canyon and debating whether it might grow to reach us. After an hour or a bit more, perhaps 3:30, a second walking backpack arrived. He looked rather haggard as he approached, and when he reached our eyrie, he dropped in a heap and drew ragged breaths for a few minutes before speaking. I'm Gerhard. Quite a climb, very healthy. A good walk. Where are the others? I'm not sure I understood, Reinhold, but I thought there were 4 in your group. I had waited a bit for him to catch his breath. Yeah, you understand. I'm the only one can speak English. We traveled together from Germany. The others are coming, but not so quick. They are not in the good shape of Reinhardt and I. Yeah, nice walk, a great climb. Yeah. Oops, page. The poor man was still shaking in his limbs after 10 minutes rest, so Rick got him some water, and after a short time more, he dragged his camera and gear toward the shelter where Reinhold was making too. Dusk came, and we left our perch to brew some tea too, and to maintain our sleeping spaces. We were with the 2 Germans when the 3rd hiker arrived. He came in after sunset, wobbling and unable to speak as he crumpled by the fire. This is Hans, Gerhard explained. Rick offered him some tea, and after some time sprawled and panting, Hans spoke and Gerhard. In the end, we convinced Rudy that he could make it the short distance over level road to the ruins where there was a roof in case of rain, the ruins where a fire was burning to dispel the cold and Inca ghosts, the ruins where there was soft, flat dirt to rest on. Gerhard lent Rudy a shoulder, and Rick and I carried his gear, and soon Rudy was sprawled by the fire in the ruins. Although the night was magical, odd sounds, deep sky with stars unchallenged by any light, cloud across the way exploding with internal lightning, smells of long-gone Incas and tropical night, the Germans seemed not to notice, and after a brief discussion, they retired early. Before making a final turn into their sleeping bags, Reinhold and Gerhard both assured me that it had been a marvelous climb, while Rudy never moved at all except to wheeze. With dawn, Reinhold gathered his companions and awake, and without breakfast or enough light to see beyond the stones at their feet, they set off along the ancient road to Machu Picchu, Reinhold leading and already moving away from the others as they went around the first bend. Well, that's it from Fresno. With peace and love, Eric.